Hello, this is Pillow Kaiser. Today in this episode, we're going to be talking about history again, but more of a philosophy side of things. I'm going to call this one historical memory loss, for obvious reasons when I name off the examples here. What do ISIS destroying Assyrian ruins, Iraqis destroying the statue of Saddam Hussein, leftists destroying Civil War era statues, and anti-communists desecrating Marx's grave have in common? What I would say is the fact that they're destroying some semblance of history. Now, you can grade these however you want based in order of how egregious they are, but they still have that vein in common. And to be honest, I find it rather abhorrent. It shouldn't matter if a historical figure or a civilization did bad things in the past. What matters is that it happened, and that we should remember this stuff. I don't care if Abraham Lincoln was racist, or John Wilkes Booth fought for the Confederacy, and Robert E. Lee owned slaves, or that the Assyrians skinned people alive in front of the gates, and they weren't Muslim, as if that matters. I don't care if the Nazis killed millions of people. It happened. You can't just book burn stuff. And no matter what you do, no matter how hard you make it for people to forget, there's always going to be evidence left behind, and when people find out, they're going to be angry that you did something to prevent them from finding out. And they're going to wonder why you did that. Because you're just cutting the tongue out from the messenger instead of actually proving them wrong or showing how it's wrong. It's obvious that it's wrong when you kill people or destroy people's belongings or take them away, redistribute them communism style. It may not be obvious to some ideologies, but it's still a component in human nature to feel empathy towards other people. No matter what time period, place, or anything really, no matter what background you come from, you can feel another person's pain. Marx, for example, he may have started an ideology that was responsible for the deaths of millions of people in many countries around the world. But the thing is that do you think that he would be proud of what his work has caused? I don't think so. It doesn't matter if he's a foolish, naive man that doesn't really understand how the world works. Maybe he was. After all, there's a saying where something can be so stupid that only an intellectual will buy into it. But that doesn't change the fact that he was one of the most influential figures of the 1800s, or the Victorian era specifically. He was one of many figures who kickstarted the modern world in terms of like one of the big three ideologies that would define the next century, and to an extent this century that we currently live in right now. In the case of the Iraqis destroying the statue of Saddam Hussein, some say you can't really blame them for destroying the statue of one of their dictators that brutalized their land. But don't you think that historians long from now would actually like to see that statue intact? This is why Americans brought back the golden AKs and other weapons from like the defeated countries, putting them in the museums. They're reminders of what happened. Now, I can't expect everything to be saved, especially after like conflict has just taken hold and a lot of civil unrest is happening right after the war or whatever's happening, and emotions are running really high and everything's just, it's really unpredictable. You can't save everything. But at least save the major things, if you can. And as for the Confederate statues, and the Civil War statues in general at this point, there's activists just destroying statues from that time period for no apparent reason other than they were racist people back then. If you want to go by that metric, then Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, basically every president up until maybe the 1980s was a little bit racist in some way, shape, or form. Are you going to destroy any monuments to them? I don't think so. Unless this world has just gotten so fed up with its own history that it's just bound to happen. But in the information age, anybody can find out stuff about anybody. You can't hide anything anymore. So everyone has made a mistake, and everybody will be exposed for making a mistake. I'm sure at one point somebody's going to expose me for one mistake that I made on the internet. And I'm just some nobody talking into the void like it really matters. Meanwhile, in China, they're probably best known for censoring their own history beyond recognition. The only reason why we know about the Three Kingdoms book and / kind of sort of history that might have happened is because Mao liked it. Meanwhile, in the Soviet Union, you weren't really allowed to talk about the past before the revolution. Which I guess, kudos to China. Well, communist China in this case, but nowadays China isn't really so communist anymore. It's more ran by a communist party to justify the totalitarian measures that they take now. Either way, there seems to be a really big push to change history to be more inclusive around in the Western world and to outright just deny things everywhere else. And this is a very dangerous precedent that we cannot allow to happen. Because in the past, there's probably a lot of things that we don't really know and we're just weeding the bias out of, just figuring out what happened for sure. And there's probably a lot of amazing things that we're going to overlook because we're probably just going to think that it's way too biased sounding and too good to be true, that the some Italian knight destroyed like several trebuchets on his own or something crazy like that. Because we're just going to think, oh, it's just the Milanese just puffing themselves up in a story against the French or something. But the thing is that you're never going to get rid of bias. You're never going to get rid of outright historical censorship and just denial of facts and everything. You can only just have the historians work with what they got. And the archaeologists will go out there and gather the evidence, and some of the historiographers will go out there and maybe just document people's thoughts and other stuff that happened, like that they experienced through and stuff like that. Like how there's a lot of people interviewing Holocaust survivors, for example. We're running low on them. And I'm glad that people are going out there documenting their stories before it's just gone. Because we cannot allow that to be lost to us as much as possible, really. Same with like people from Holodomor, like that one big famine in the Soviet Union, specifically against the Ukrainians. We can't forget that. Another thing that I hear is that in Japan, yes, I'm not gonna hold any punches against them, despite how much I like their culture. They have a large push to censor parts of their history, especially around World War II and around the invasion of China in 1937 specifically. And it's really weird to see this in a, well, I won't say democratic, it's more of a republic. It boggles my mind how a country with supposed freedom can do this to their own citizens, really, by limiting information like that. I mean, they still censor most of their porn for some reason. So I guess you can't really expect anything less from them at this point. Meanwhile, in the West, instead of outright banning things or, blocking certain information in terms of, history that happened around 20 years or more ago. They don't really restrict the information as much. It's more of a changing it and teaching it to the masses as a completely modified version. And it's really weird to see, let's say, a Black Knight in 1300s France. There's no excuse for this. History is facts, and it's a cohesive story that happened. You cannot change any of the details. It just happened. You cannot pretend to manipulate the details and say that you're moral, because you're just lying to yourself. And you're lying to everyone around you, and everybody can see that, outside of your little bubble of an ideology. Stop. Every single person that does any of these things must be stopped at any cost. As a person that has a passion for history, prehistory, and anthropology for the longest time, pretty much all of my life, it sickens me to see this happen. And the worst part is I know deep down it has always been happening, and I'm just noticing it more and more. What a good professional, or even amateur, does is weed through all the bias, all of the crafting of the narrative, and destroying of all the factual information and just everything, and try to find what actually happened. There's a lot of bullshit that historians have to go through just to find out a single battle and like the death toll, for example, and just estimates. A high and low. You can't ever get an exact number. Even modern days you can't do this, but if you can't get like just normal numbers, or like the day that a battle or a war or a treaty happened, then that's kind of scary to see like what happens when you try to get like actual historical quotes down. I mean, for instance, there's a whole slew of quotes supposedly uttered by your favorite historical figure. I will guarantee you that half of them did not even utter out of their mouths one time in their entire lives. Which is why there was a meme a while back where you take just any random historical figure and just mangle their words. Which, I mean, is entertaining, but it's completely accurate. People put words into other people's mouths all the time, in modern politics and in history. People skew the meaning, or just twist the words beyond recognition to what they were originally intended to be. It's downright naive to even think of the possibility that you can't do this. For instance, what are people going to think about modern politics as they are now, without living through it, about like 300 years down the line? A lot of the small details that give nuance to what is happening right now is probably going to be completely missed. Whether you think X politician is good or bad, or Middle Eastern country number 34 is going to be in a good situation in 30 years, doesn't matter. The point is that nobody's going to really remember everything that ever happens. And we're never going to know the full story. It's somewhat sad to think about, but it's just the fact of the situation that we're living in. This has been more of a ranty video, but I'm just going to end it here. I hope the takeaway is that these people are very similar to each other. Maybe not extreme equivalents, but they still have that lingering thing in the back of their head where they think that they can do good somehow by destroying an inanimate object that was very important maybe 1,000 years ago to 30 years ago. It doesn't matter if the monument was built after the event happened. It's a monument to what happened, not to what was moral. Pillow Kaiser out.